Hello everyone, I'm Wave, and today I wanted to talk about a visual novel that I finished reading not too long ago, being the original Mizuiro. It's a pretty old school visual novel that's fairly energetic and full of a lot of fun, but also the occasional somber and tearful moments. Let's get into it. So first off, when you do boot up Mizuiro, you might be a little shocked and kind of questioning if you even have the right game open, because the UI is fairly old school. All of the stuff along with text speed, or if you want to skip previously read dialogue, it's all along the top bar of the screen. Which is something that I've seen before, but not too many times. When you first boot up the game, you're going to be within a prologue followed by common route. And what's weird about common route and the prologue is that it is entirely black and white, and then also that there is no voice acting. It's just the music, and that's going to probably run you a good maybe hour and a half, 2 hours, I want to say, before you get onto the designated route or whatever character that your choices led you to. And it's a little weird getting used to that. So when you first boot into the game, you're going to be like, oh, this is very old school, and also is the production value of this game pretty high? I think once you do get into actual dedicated character routes, you're going to find that yes, the game is quite enjoyable and there is some quality there. One thing I think that's going to be kind of off-putting as well is the fact that music-wise, there isn't a really solid system for looping the tracks once one track ends, but I can actually talk about how that goes into how it didn't actually bother me. I have maybe 2 other visual novels that I can think of off the top of my head where they had the same situation. But in those cases, those visual novels that aren't Mizuiro had it to where the same track would constantly loop throughout longer scenes. And then in Mizuiro, I think the pacing of this game is quite rapid. Could be kind of the reasoning for it is because it is an older visual novel, but there is not a whole lot of padding. You're constantly progressing, and I think it goes along with how the day cycle is, to where they don't want you to feel like you're stuck for too long on any topic that might be sort of mundane. It will slow down once you get into more of the serious topics, but at the same time jumping from point to point to point. And even so with some conversations, if as a conversation might start to evolve, they don't play the same track over and over and over. They will switch up the soundtrack based off of the overall tone. And so I would think, as the music might not properly loop, you'll have it where it will be not really a problem. And in the cases where it is the same soundtrack and the music that's currently playing ends, and you get that maybe 4 or 5 second pause before when it starts again, it didn't actually bother me, because I think, one, the music in this game is really, really solid. And then secondly is that during those moments of pause, it actually kind of helps to create these artificial moments to where if something is being said that's relatively serious, you are going to be paying even more attention during those moments where there is no audio apart from the actual voice acting. And I think that's sort of an unintentional, happy little accident that happens with the game. Now talking about just how I was saying with pacing, I feel I really do like how energetic and how quirky and fun the game is. It kind of does have that day cycle where most mornings throughout the visual novel, you'll wake up, you'll either be able to sit down for breakfast, or maybe you're running late for school. So then you dart out the door and you run towards the school to get to your class on time. You sleep through class, and then you go right into whatever activities that the player character is going to be doing for that said day. It feels kind of cliche, but at the same time, it felt pretty energizing, where there's not really a whole lot of moments in Mizuiro, I felt, where there is just you're not engaged. You're actively having fun seeing the characters interact with one another, and just overall enjoying the overall vibes of the story. And then when you actually get into deeper into a character route, there is the moments where story kind of starts to change in tone, and you get to have those like cry scenes where everything becomes more emotional and a lot of things start to hit you directly. I think this kind of goes in line with how well they kind of write the stories. One thing I noted was that across all the routes, there is like, they're able to do various things when it comes to writing. And I'll say, for one example, is that pretty much all of the routes are able to utilize rain as like a recurring kind of elevation for when it comes to making the tone of the story shift. What I mean by that is you can have this very like energetic, it's springtime and it's bright, sunny, and all of that like kind of just almost like childish energy. And when something as simple, something that is just like a regular occurrence as rain, and being able to make it where it feels like this very emotionally impacting kind of setting, where you can have the sound effects of rain and use that as like some sort of thing to where the mood starts to darken across people that are around the player character, and have it to where maybe instead of being this like very carefree, just going along with the vibe kind of feeling, when something such as rain occurs, all of a sudden the tone shifts and you feel this sort of like dread, or like you're trying to rush to get something done because you're panicking. And I do think in that way, it's just one example, but there's a lot of examples of that kind of story writing that I found throughout Mizuiro, where they're able to take very like normal everyday things and make it feel very important. Even alongside that too, there's like a pretty solid way of like being able to have foreshadowing that's very subtle. You might have it to where something is kind of brought up very quickly throughout an earlier portion of a character route, and then you, the reader, alongside the player character, might forget that kind of like little bit of a throwaway line, and then as you get later into the route, that plot line kind of comes back, and it's brought back in a way that is very important to the like girl on that dedicated character route. You, the reader, alongside the player, get to feel that moment of like, oh man, I messed up, I forgot, and then now it kind of has this like level of, I don't know, it makes you feel a little bit more connected. And I did enjoy the way, like the overall writing of Mizuiro. And like I said too, I mean, it's a pretty old school visual novel, but I found myself really enjoying it. I like the pacing, I like the characters, I like the music, and overall I genuinely enjoy it. I don't think it's like the longest maybe nakage that I've read, as far as like, I don't know if you'd even want to consider it a nakage, but I think because of how old it is, it's not necessarily the longest visual novel that you could read, but at the same time, I actually found that to be pretty good. Probably the most emotional route in the original Mizuiro is going to be one that is pretty easy to land on because it's dedicated to just one choice, the very first choice in Common Route. So it's kind of a 50-50 on whether or not you are going to be able to get to the other 4 character routes, or if you are going to land onto the most emotional one from the get-go, which is what happened to me. And I think it's like only a couple hours long too, so I actually found it to be quite good, that being the shortest route but also being like the most impactful. And I think it is a visual novel that you could pick up and get a really good amount of enjoyment out of for not too much of an investment. It is still probably like maybe around like a 30-hour VN if I had to guess, but overall, yeah, I did enjoy my time with Mizuiro. One thing I do think that is pretty important to kind of note about Mizuiro though, as I've been saying with the quote-unquote like original Mizuiro, is that there is, I guess, 2 other versions that we could talk about. One is the like Dreamcast / PlayStation 2 version, which came out a little later. And no, I didn't pull another clear and read through the PS2 version of Mizuiro alongside the PC version, so sorry if you were expecting me to. That adds 1 new heroine route, and I think touches up a few other things. I can't really speak too much on it, but I know it's like in a similar vein as Clear, where it is like a quote-unquote definitive version. Honestly too, I do have to wonder how that kind of works. I will say that one of the heroine routes in Mizuiro does feel heavily impacted, like tension-wise, based off of an H scene. So I would have to say that console version, hopefully they kind of were able to circumvent that and make it still have that scene have the same weight that it did in the original PC release. But then also, there is, as of recording right now, it was towards the end of March, so only like 2 months back for me, they released Mizuiro Remake, which is a brand new version of the game that uses the Dreamcast version as a base, but with, you know, newer graphics, newer, just like everything. They did not change the soundtrack, but it does graphically look quite good. UI has been fixed up to where it feels more modernized, and yeah, it looks pretty good. And no one like really knows about Mizuiro Remake as far as I'm aware, so I didn't know about it either. So thank you to the people in the comments that kind of made me aware of Mizuiro Remake, because yes, I caved. So I did end up buying Mizuiro Remake and spent like a good portion yesterday setting it up, getting it installed alongside getting Textractor to work alongside it. I'll have a review on the remake version at a later date. I'm not necessarily going to jump right into it. I'm at least going to read one, maybe two other visual novels in between reading original Mizuiro and reading remake, just so that way I have a little bit of a buffer. But yeah, figured it would be something worth mentioning. Also, if for some reason, before I've even really talked about it in detail, if you are interested in getting the remake version over the original, I would say that go ahead and try and get it as soon as possible, because the developers already stopped making copies of the game. Literally, like, you know, 2 months after release. And the only way to get it right now is through an online shop. And I had to go ahead and order it via proxy and have it shipped out from Japan. That was a little bit sketchy because it was the first time I'd ever really done that, but was able to do it without any hassle and actually was quite happy with the service. But figured it's something that's worth mentioning because I have no idea how long Mizuiro Remake is going to actually retail for. And yeah, you're going to have to look for it somewhere else if / when it goes down. And also, no, there isn't any plans to get a downloaded version of the game up at any point. Saw that on the developer's Twitter, actually. Somebody had asked it and they said, no, not really thinking about it right now. So yeah, Mizuiro Remake surprisingly is somehow harder to find than the original version from 24 years ago. Funny how that works. But yeah, as far as those were my thoughts on the original Mizuiro, I had a lot of fun reading it, and I think it is overall almost like kind of just like a classic visual novel that I think a lot of people would enjoy reading if it was translated. And unfortunately it is not. But yeah, I would say it is a very fun and also emotional visual novel. I've been Wayne. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.